Well, here we are, August 30th. Can you believe it? Where did it go? Where'd the past 6 go, right? All right. So we've been exploring this month the science of mind principle of oneness. And we've looked at what it means to become self-aware. That's how we started off. We've practiced inclusion. We've looked at the practice of diversity and what that means. And last week, Reverend Catherine was here. I hope you enjoyed her. And she was discussing the idea of multiplicity within this oneness. So today we're going to wrap up the whole series with my talk, Oneness is Not Sameness. Oneness is not sameness. And we're going to look at this from the perspective of something rather mystical that our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, used to say, and that was, we must remain open at the top. Anybody ever heard that before? Open at the top? Ernest used to say that. Yeah. Well, it's sort of like Nemo in the fish tank. Remember Nemo? Fish tank's open on the top, isn't it? Anyway, if you recall, y'all were supposed to laugh. If you recall, we left off a couple of weeks ago, and Nemo and his friends in their failed attempt to break out of the fish tank, right? For Nemo to stop the pump and stuff. Well, and everybody was very upset at the end of that because Nemo almost got hurt, particularly Gil, the leader of the tank. He was very upset by it. And he told Nemo, no, we're not doing that again. We'll do something else. We're not going to do that again. Nemo didn't listen, and he took off by himself to take care of it, and he was successful this time. He stopped the pump. Everybody was so excited in the tank, and they went about dirtying it up to get the algae all over it so that the dentist would have to come. And remember their escape plan? Take them out of the tank, put them in the plastic bags. They're going to roll across the counter, out the window, across the street, and then into Sydney Harbor. What could go wrong? So the dentist began to notice the tank was getting kind of green and nasty, and he thought there was something wrong with the pump. So he put in a whole new filter system that scanned it all the time and cleaned it up almost instantly. So once again, their escape plan is thwarted. Do you remember the dentist's niece, Darla? The braces, pigtails, remember her? And the fish were all terrified of her. Well, it's her birthday, and she's coming in to get her birthday present, which, if you remember, was to be Nemo. Well, sure enough, the dentist goes and takes him out of the tank and puts him in a plastic bag, and Nemo flips up on his back, closes his eyes, and plays dead. Well, the dentist is taking him over to put him in the fish tank, thought flush him, and Gil always says, every drain leads to the ocean. Yay, he's going to get flushed. And the dentist stops and opens the trash can. And the fish are just beside themselves. Oh my gosh, and they get all in a frenzy, and they fire up the bubble machine inside of the tank, and Gil gets in it, and they shoot Gil out. And about the same time, we find out that Marlin and Dory have made it to the harbor, and they're in a little bit of a pickle. They're surrounded by seagulls who are about to eat them when this wonderful pelican named Nigel comes up and picks him up. He's heard about Nemo, and he flies him off, and he flies to the dentist's office. Well, they arrive about the time this whole chaos is starting to happen, and Marlin sees what's happening. He's concerned about Nemo because Nemo looks dead, and he makes the pelican go in and flies around the office, and there's mass chaos. Well, in that chaos, Nemo and Gil land on the dentist's tray, and Marlin, Dory, and Nigel only see him kind of looking dead. And Marlin's really upset. So Nigel flies them back and puts Dory and Marlin back in the water. But he's not dead. Nemo's not dead. So he jumps and he gets in the drain, and he goes spinning down the drain and out the tube and into the water treatment plant. Now, I had to wonder if this was the one where they had used the beer for biogas. But I don't know. So when I thought about these characters in the film, as I'm watching the interaction with them, I think that the contrast that we're seeing in this show is wonderful. And if you think about it, it's geared towards children, which is wonderful, but we adults seem to like the movie too because it was so popular. But I think what we're seeing is a wonderful example of the difference in a negative and a positive mindset. The difference in a negative and a positive mindset. In the science of mind, we are told that that we need to maintain a consistent positive outlook. A negative outlook is demonstrated in the character of Marlin, which is Nemo's dad. If you remember, the ocean is a dangerous place. Be afraid, Nemo. Nemo, you've got this handicap. You've got a fin smaller than the other. You can't do everything everybody else can. He was trying to escape from the whale when they got swallowed by him, and he's banging against the baleen teeth and trying to get out. And Dory, who is the complete opposite, she's the live in the moment girl, and she has fun wherever she is. She's doing backflips and swimming and giggling in the currents inside the whale's mouth. But Marlin is just wringing his fins and worrying. So we can see demonstrated before us the total difference in these two attitudes of mind. And we see them as traveling companions throughout the whole movie, and we get this wonderful example of light and dark, positive, negative, yin and yang throughout the whole movie. And then there's Nemo. Now, he gets sad a few times, doesn't he? He gets afraid sometimes. We see his vulnerability. But really what we see in little Nemo is his courage and his determination. Remember when he went to school, he was so excited to go to school for the first day. And the first thing he did was get off of the reef, right? Get away from the reef, and he wanted to go touch the boat. Remember? That's what the fish called it. And so he swam up and did, but he got caught. But then he was the first one he agreed to go up into the pump and stop it. And he almost died. He almost got hurt doing that. But then he courageously went back by himself and did it, and he was successful. And not knowing for sure that all drains lead to the ocean, he jumped headfirst in the sink anyway, right? Did it anyway. So I think Nemo's a pretty brave little fish. And I think he is an example of what our founder, Ernest Holmes, was communicating when he said we must be open at the top. We must remain open at the top. He said, if I believed I had a revelation of the science of mind teaching of the book, I would shudder at the thought, for there is no man so hypnotized as the one who coerces himself. I have wondered if it is possible to avoid this mesmeric state. If any group ever avoids it, we will. But in order to do so, we have to keep our minds open at the top for a new influx of wisdom. And we have to set up a sign which says, stop, look, listen. Does this that I believe measure up to truth? Open at the top. Think about your life. Are you open for the influx of new wisdom, no matter where it may come from? The little kid can't give me any wisdom. That old person can't give me any wisdom. There can't be any wisdom from that homeless person on the street. Are we willing to be open to the influx of wisdom no matter where it comes from? And if we remember that we're all one in this oneness, we're all connected, can't wisdom come from any one of us? Yeah, from anywhere, as long as we're open at the top for that influx of wisdom. This openness is really our spiritual journey, isn't it? It's that seeker's path that many of us have burning in our hearts to have a deeper connection with the divine, to know more, to understand more, to go deeper with it, to have that closer connection with the divine. Marlin had a trauma. Do you remember that in the beginning of the movie? When he and his wife, I think her name was Coral, They had a little attack by a barracuda, and it didn't turn out well. So he was traumatized. But out of that, what did he do? He moved into that trauma. He decorated a house, and he invited folks over to tell them the story. Now, we can move through our traumas. We all have traumas in our lives. They may be physical, they may be emotional, they may be financial. We all have traumas in our lives, but we have a choice to either move through those traumas or move into them. Move through them or move into them. Moving out of it and moving into the trauma and owning and embodying that victim's story is the express lane for being closed at the top. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago, Pete the duck story? Remember that? How are you doing with extension instead of projection? Practicing? Projection part's easier, isn't it? It's so easy to project our beliefs on somebody else and make up a story about what they're doing, saying, thinking, or how they're being. But to stop that and to open up to the extension of love, that's where our work is. That's where our work is. If you remember, the people that the duck was quacking at were projecting their worldview onto it, onto the duck. So of course we do that with each other. And I'd have to suggest that maybe they were closed at the top, that they weren't open to the influx of wisdom. Holmes' question in that quote, does what I believe measure up to truth? It's a good question. Does what I believe measure up to truth? How open are we at the top? How genuinely willing are we to question our beliefs? How willing are we to do the deep work to change our beliefs? When I first heard the phrase open at the top, I projected on Ernest Holmes' beautiful wisdom words my belief in the hierarchy of business. That's where I was at the time when I first heard that. And the Centers for Spiritual Living had gone through some turmoil back in the 50s and 60s, and there was a split within the organization. And so I assumed when I heard open at the top, he was saying to the regime that he stayed with as leaders at home office, you must be open at the top. You must be open at the top. But that wasn't what he was saying. He was saying to all of us to be open at the top of our own minds to the influx of wisdom, of greater wisdom. So I projected my business hierarchy on a very mystical saying of Ernest Holmes. We do stuff like that, don't we? We do stuff like that. I've had an opportunity this week to watch some of this in action in the business world, and there's been some conflict in one of our companies, and it's interesting to hear people stand and pass judgment on what that person is thinking. Why they're doing armchair psychology, why they're doing this. It's just hysterical to listen to it from this perspective. And I wonder what would happen if instead of all of the animosity between the parties and the projection, if there was a true opening to, what's going on? Your behavior has seemingly changed a bit in the last 30 days. Let's talk. Open up. Reach in. But just like me projecting on Ernest Holmes, we all operate from our base of knowledge, don't we? We operate from our experience. That's how we do it. That's how we've learned to do it. And we assume that what we believe is true and that everybody else really should think the way we do, right? Well, of course. And they're going to see it the same way as I do. Isn't that beautiful? Not really. That's an easy example, but it's like that in every area of our lives. Unfortunately, when we discover that may create some conflict for us. Then we want to argue and justify our position because our belief is right and theirs is wrong. The practice that we use to help ourselves move through this is, of course, our meditation. and getting the observer effect. If you remember our book from a couple of months ago, The Untethered Soul, he talked about the observer effect and getting beyond our ego and getting beyond our sense of righteousness, right and wrong, beyond the fear that we may be feeling, and to see with fresh eyes. To see with fresh eyes. It's very easy to get stuck in our beliefs. Anybody stuck in their beliefs? Sure, we have some that we are, yeah. Ernest Holmes tells us that the science of mind, which is the philosophy that we teach, attempts to penetrate more deeply into the essence of the spirit within us. Its theoretical principle is that the real essence of our mind and life is pure spirit. Hence, of necessity, science of mind must teach spiritual concepts, and at the same time should include in such teaching the highest and most advanced thought that can be gathered from all sources. That's open at the top, isn't it? That statement. All sources. And I found an interesting definition as I was going through this week about open at the top. I just decided to Google it and see what came up. Ernest Holmes attributed to him. Well, it turns out it's a principle. And I found the definition from the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. Festive group, I'm sure. No offense to our engineers out there. Open at the top means that there is no predefined top-level application. New applications may be created at any time. That's what science of mind is about. Isn't that interesting? Open at the top. We have only scratched the surface, I believe, of what is possible. And science of mind has been some of the impetus for what we have seen occur in the last 40 years in motivational materials, in self-help industry, in coaching, life coaching, all of that sort of thing. It is a compilation of ideas of many spiritual systems, including psychology, philosophy, and I really, in thinking about this week, we have fundamentalists in all religions, right? You know that. We have them in religious science too, just so you know, and are not surprised if you come across one. We do have them. And I used to be a bit of one. But this helped me to understand what Holmes was really teaching us about being open. And I just hope that we don't get stuck where we are. I don't think we change what we have. I just think we're the leaders of new thought, so new thinking, and not allow our organization not our organization, but our teaching to become stale. Holmes was really talking about the evolution of our spirit, and that's like our own evolution as well, right? Our personal evolution, and that will continue. But if we allow ourselves to get stuck and closed off and no longer welcoming, resistant to the new, okay, let's talk about new. Let's talk about different. Let's talk about COVID. Are we all in the new? The unknown? The uncertain? Yeah, we are. How are we rolling with that? Are we closed at the top? Are we resistant to what is happening that we're dealing with? Or are we open and looking at this as maybe it could be an opportunity for us to experience something new on the other side? Is it opportunity or is it challenge? Set up the sign. Stop, look, listen. Does what I believe still measure up to truth? Well, it's the end of our series. We better get Nemo home, don't you think? Yeah. He gets out of the treatment plant, and he runs into Dory, and they find Dad finally because they'd separated, and Marlon was pretty depressed. But then Dory gets captured in a fishing net, and Nemo has to go in and help him get saved from that, and everybody gets out and everybody's fine there. But then the next thing we see, Nemo's back in school. I have no idea how they got back to the reef. No idea at all. But he's back in school right to where the whole thing started, if you remember. First day of school. It's all right back to the first day. And it's kind of like our friend Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. Was it all just a dream? Was it all just a dream? Let's close today with our spiritual practices for this week. And don't forget, if you're not on the sign-up sheet for Mindful Mondays, that's a newsletter that I send out to you that has the principles, practicing the principles, more details. It has the quotes and some of the things from service today that you can use in your week for your spiritual practices. You can sign up out in the lobby, or if you folks online, you can just send an email into the info@scottsdalecsl.org and we'll get you signed up. Number 1, does what I believe measure up to truth? That's a good question. Does what I believe measure up to truth? It's easy to hear others in their conversation when they're saying things that, oh gosh, it's flu season. Everybody's going to get sick. That's a belief, isn't it? That's a belief. Does that belief serve us? No. So that's what we're talking about. Does what I believe measure up to truth? And it can be something surface. It can be something really deep. I invite you to use a journal to record your thoughts about it. And if you really want to do some deep work, take all areas of your life. What do you believe about relationships with people? What do you believe about work that brings you joy? About having to work in general? What do you believe about God? What do you believe about these things? And as you write these down and look at them on paper, take them into your contemplation and ask if they still serve me. Does it serve the vision that I hold for my life? It's interesting. We've been watching the old series Grey's Anatomy. Anybody remember that? Yeah, it's a pretty good series. And last night there was a conversation. There was a young woman who was explaining to someone all of the horrible things that had happened in her life for the last 2 years. There's this and this, and the life's off the rail, and there's drugs, and there's blood. It's just really a horrible story. And the person she was speaking to looked at her and she goes, "Where do you want to be 2 years from now?" And I just was struck by that statement. I thought it was very profound. As we look at where we are today, August 30th, 2020, and the past 5 months or so that we've had, where do you want to be in 2 years? Where do you want to be in 2 years? Transformation begins right now, doesn't it? Right now. Where do you want to be in 2 years? And what action can you take to get there? Number 2, can we be surrounded by differences and maintain our awareness of oneness? This, of course, is the quote that I started out the month with by our spiritual leader, Reverend Dr. Edward Villoon. And I just still think it's such a profound question for us. And I invite you to use your contemplation of that statement and see where you deepen with it, and then take it into your life. When you find yourself surrounded by differences, can I maintain my awareness of oneness in this? In this. Right? We've just come through 2 political conventions. Anybody watch both of them? Oh, yeah, there you go. And we're nominating the next president of our United States. And on the other side of those conventions, we still have anger, fear, frustration, animosity, downright nastiness in some cases, don't we? And you know what? It's probably going to get worse before it gets better in the next 2 months. Maybe. I'm going to invite us to step into love. Extension. To step into extension and out of projection. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on or which candidate you like. Step into love. Step into extension. expressing our well-researched and opinions and views, that's all good sport, isn't it? It's all good sport. But attacking another physically, verbally, or in written word, that's not okay. It's time to be kind. It's time to be kind. It's time that we learn how to disagree and still be kind. This is a process. We've all been through it. We've all been through many, many election seasons, haven't we? We've seen it. We've seen it. I invite you to join me in a spirit of love. And remember that we, including Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and everybody in Washington and everybody across this nation and everybody across this planet, we are one. We are one. If something triggers you about this picture, and either person in it, I invite you to investigate that emotion further. As Alan Cohen said in A Course in Miracles, the only choice is love or fear. I invite us today to choose love. So it is. So would you join me for a prayer this morning as we go within to that place of silence and stillness and place of love? For that is the very core of each and every one of us, the God spark that is life itself breathing through us. Not only those of us gathered here in the room, those online, but all people across this planet. We are one. We are one in love. We are one in truth. We are one in God. And so as I know that we are open at the top for the influx of divine wisdom, for the guidance that we seek and the perfect right next steps of our lives. Where do we want to be in 2 years? This is where I want to be. Show me the way. We were listening to Ricky Byers this morning. Use me, oh God. This is a time for spiritual communities everywhere to step into love, to step into extension, to choose love. And how grateful I am that this community is founded on love, is the divine idea in the mind of God, and that each that is called to it is love. And so I release this into the action of that love, into the action of that law, knowing that it is done and it is so, as we affirm together. And so it is.